Okay, the recording has started. So again, if you're watching the recording, welcome to the July 11th session of the study hall, where today's topic is more boldface problems. And all of the problems in today's session are from the official gmatprep software, which is copyright GMAT. Those problems are free for distribution, unlike the official guide problems, which again are paid copyrighted material. So we can distribute the former but not the latter. Okay, so, and don't forget where the multiple choice answers are found. They are found underneath your name. So let's go ahead and get going with one of these. Let's try this one. How about this one? So again, remember where your multiple choice answers are found. It may be a little bit interesting to read the screenshot here, but if it's too small for you to read it, just make your entire Illuminate window bigger, and that should take care of the problem. So, apologies for the slightly diagonal quality of the text. All right, so let's go ahead and put a timer on the screen. These problems do have more words than other problems, so we will give you a little bit of additional time. So here we go. Okay, there's still a lot of people here who haven't picked an answer choice yet. So please do so. Again, this is the GMAT. The GMAT is a test where you can't really not pick things because you won't be able to move on to the next problem until you do. So, I mean, granted, I can't really force you to pick something right now, but if you don't pick something, then you're not really prepping for the test you're actually going to take. So I'll give you 15 more seconds, and please pick one of the choices. Thanks. Okay, so here are your class statistics for this problem. So overall, not really a strong majority for anything. It looks like the group seems to prefer choice C here, although choice C is not what the actual answer to this problem is. So you can have some learning going on here. It's always a good thing. But first, let's back up and talk about what is going on in these problems in general. So notice what the words in the problem actually say. And this is the place you want to start, of course, and more generally when you're doing critical reasoning, don't forget that if you understand what the question is asking you, then you don't really have to do any of this classifying stuff. Like, you just have to answer the question that they give you. However, if you don't really understand totally what's going on with the question, then that's where sort of having a classification or having a general schema here could possibly help. But the first thing is, let's just look at the words and see what they say. So notice in all of these boldface questions, it's the two portions in boldface. Play the following roles. I mean, right now all we're doing is reading the question, but that's kind of a big deal because a lot of people are not really going about this the right way. So let's talk about what is going on with this kind of task here in the first place. So what are you actually supposed to do? What do you do in boldface problems? So let me give you a much simpler example of what's going on here. Let's say someone says to me, Ron, your fly is down. Okay, so I mean, granted, this is not in an entire argument, but if someone tells me that, what is the role played by that statement? See if anybody has an answer to that in a normal sort of social situation here. So we have people saying it's like a fact or something like that. That is exactly not the role played by the statement. I mean, that's what the statement is, but it's not the role of the statement. Those are very, very different things. And the first three people who responded to this are all like, oh, it's just a random fact. It's not a random fact. The question is, what's the why? So, and it's not supposed to be a conclusion either. Like, if, so again, okay, so answers you don't want to give here. I'm assuming you guys know, your fly is down, as you're supposed to sit the thing up, right? So what you don't really want to give here, yeah, KT is coming a little bit closer to the mark here. You don't want to give, oh, it's a fact. You definitely don't want to give it indicates the physical position of your zipper. You don't want anything like that. And it's also not a conclusion because you're not trying to prove it, or that's not the point of your argument. What you do want to give is like why it's also not just communicating random information. I mean, you have to say like, why would you tell Ron that his fly is down? Because you want him to zip it up. So the answer you do want is more like, well, it's more like to present a situation that needs attention or needs to be fixed. I mean, you see the difference here, right? It's not just a random fact. It's not like Ron is 5 feet and 10 inches tall. Random fact. Or the walls in this room are brown. Random fact. I mean, there's a reason why this thing is being presented, and it is not just to randomly give information with a smile. So make sure you understand this. So the best way I can, differentiate here in the fewest words is to say that these are not what we want because these are just the what. They're not the why. So, in other words, you don't just want to say what the statement is because that's not the role. That's not what role means. Like, role is not what is it. Role is what does it do. So these are just the what, not the why. This is the why. So, I mean, smiley face, if you guys understand that, because most people, in fact, every single respondent except for KT is still saying things like it's a statement or like a random observation, which that doesn't get at the heart of why somebody would tell me that. That's not a role. What does it do? So what you need to do, and I mean, apparently we got to get ourselves off on the right foot here, because I think we all out there in the, I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that everybody out there understands the your fly is down example. But when it comes to actually elucidating what the roles are, you have to think about where are we going with this. So figure out the role of a statement, which is like the why of the statement. You must think about that. You have to think about where is the speaker going with this. Why? Why is the speaker telling me this? And perhaps the most useful piece of information, or it's not information, perhaps the most useful thing you can do to help you with this is, it's going to sound a little bit weird, but the strongest piece of machinery that you've got going for you here, in my experience, is to give the speaker a name. That might sound even stupid. That might sound like something that's not going to accomplish much. But let's talk about that difference. Like when you have to think about the why here, when you consider it really in all of these critical reasoning problems, but especially in this sort of problem where you have to be like, where are they going with it? So in all CR, but especially in boldface problems, what you should do is you should give the speaker a name. Okay, someone give me a name. Reasonably, like, culturally neutral name. Okay, Tom. Let's take Tom. You Ryan next time. Sure. Just think of the difference between these things. It's weird how big the difference is in human perception here, but it's a big, big difference. If you say the argument says Ron flies down, and then the question is, what is the role played by the statement? I mean, that seems all abstract and stuff like that, and apparently this is really hard because almost everybody responding to this got it wrong. I mean, again, you were giving me statements that were not factually incorrect, but they didn't capture what the role of the statement was. On the other hand, if we just make this into a conversational type of situation, Tom says, Ron flies down. So, why is Tom telling me this? I mean, just ponder that for a moment, because if you think about the second of these questions here, it should become really obvious, very surprisingly much so. It should become very surprisingly obvious that things like, oh, it's a statement, or it is a fact, or it is the physical position of your zipper. I mean, those are very clearly not true, because those are not the reason that somebody named Tom would tell me this. Like, if someone is telling me this, it's because they want to let me know there is a problem. There is a situation, Ron, that you need to like fix here. And I mean, what's going on here? There's a certain amount of psychology behind this that you've got to understand. But basically, you know, there's this cliche saying out there that man is a social animal and all that. But it's really a thing. I mean, our brains are much, much better equipped to apprehend and understand information in a conversation. So if we just make these things into dialogues with imaginary speakers in our heads, we're going to be a lot better off than if we don't. So in summary, basically you should find this much easier to think about. Even though it's effectively the same. I mean, you know, the argument is just Tom, and what is the role is the same thing as why. But this is weirdly abstract, and you don't do this in the real world. You don't have, like, what is the role of this statement? You have this, why? Why do I care? Why are you telling me that? So the challenge, of course, is to take that same sort of instinct and bring it to this game of GMAT boldface problems. So let me take this to the next page. Okay, you should see the same picture up there in a sec. So here are some general hints. And what we're going to do here is we're going to black out. We're actually going to get rid of the answer choices for a second, and we'll talk about why. So let's do that. So I should go ahead and get rid of the answer choices. All right, there we go. So two things you should do when you have on a boldface problem. The first thing you should do is make it a conversation or name the speaker. I mean, you should always do this, but I mean, including on other types of critical reasoning too. I mean, you should actually do that with every critical reasoning problem. But the other thing you should try doing is what we're doing here, which is to sort of temporarily obliterate the answer choices. And I mean, the answer choices are going to show up there on the screen. I mean, you will, I mean, so this may amount to physically putting a hand up in front of them, if that should be necessary. Why would you want to do that? So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Well, what's up with ignore the answer choices? First of all, why can you do that? And second of all, why would you want to? Those are not necessarily the same question. Yeah, right? So that you can focus on what you've read and what it means. And so that you distraction or muddy your thought process is pretty much the idea. So first of all, let's talk about the why can you do this in the first place. The reason you can is because the role played by a statement is really not more than one thing. I mean, if Tom is telling me my fly is down because it's a problem, then he's not also telling me that for some other reason. You know? So why can you do this? So Gina will get there in a sec. The reason why you can do this is because the role played by a statement, which is the why of that statement, is something that it's one thing, basically, for each statement. So if you can figure it out, there's not really other possibilities. In other words, if you understand how the argument works, you should actually be able to figure it out or predict it. And I mean, in response to Gina's question there, this is not really something you can do with other types of questions because, like, for example, if I have to weaken an argument, then there are like 10 zillion billion ways to do that. You know, like if I say someone's eating a lot more food, therefore they're going to gain weight. If I want to weaken that, maybe I'm going to say, oh, they're working out a lot more, because that would weaken that argument. But then the correct answer might be, oh, they are eating food that has fewer calories, or they are taking, you know, medicine that speeds up metabolism. But there's like a million bazillion ways that it could weaken the argument. So meaning if I predict a certain way to weaken the argument, then I might be totally on board with that, but they might have just chosen a different way. So careful there. But the role played by a statement can't really be more than one thing, because there is a reason why the statement is there, and it is what it is. So that's the why. And then that's the why can you do this. So why can. But on top of the why can you do this, there's also the why should you do this. And that's what a lot of you guys have captured here, where distraction, muddying thought processes. I mean, absolutely, right? Because the point is that these things are not supremely and weirdly complicated things, but what they are is there's a lot of weird words in the answer choices. And because of the way that I mean, when you don't have a Tom, when you don't have some sort of interlocutor in conversation, you have to make up all these strange, you know, ways of saying stuff, which would be easier if you had a person's name. So basically, it's because the answer choices are weird, first of all. I mean, they're still weird even if you totally understand what's going on. Even if you are 100% on board with the argument. The phrasing of the choices is still very strange. I mean, I personally have to read through these choices lots of times before I have any clue what they're really trying to say. So you probably do too. They're weird. But then also, as is the problem with a lot of these other things, it's possible that the choices might plant ideas in your head. And if you already know what's going on, then you don't want to take that risk, right? Like if you know why Tom is telling me my fly is down, you don't want to read through other possible suggestions because the brain, the brain is very suggestible. So let's do this. Let's name the speaker here. So we have Ryan. Talk about that. And I mean, making these conversations is sort of weird, granted, because these are not the kinds of things that random people would talk about every single day. But again, being able to do that is instrumental, because I mean, the point here is to become sort of a nerd about this kind of stuff. And what I mean by that is, the only thing that really differentiates nerds from other people is the fact that they care about stuff enough to like talk about it with each other. It's not really a difference of being smart or not smart. It's if you can personalize this kind of material in the way that nerds do, then that's a good thing. So, yeah, I heart R star. We'll get there in a sec. But if you got the right angle on this stuff, it should be there. It's just going to be in kind of strange words. But again, let's try to make it a conversation. Make this a conversation. I mean, it's weird, sure, but try to personalize the situation in whatever sort of way. I mean, if you probably know somebody who owns a business. So I mean, if you can make it their business, your friend or you or your family member, then it's easier to think about. And if you absolutely can't, like if there's no way, if you can't find any easy way to do that, then just frame it in your head as something I read in an article or something like that. So, I mean, if it's something about dinosaur bones that were found in the La Brea dinosaur pits, well, I mean, okay, you probably don't have friends who are digging around dinosaur pits every day. So fine, but you can still make that something like, I read this, or I saw this on the Discovery Channel, or I saw this somewhere, I read this somewhere. It's a thing that I was thinking about in the real world. So let's do that here. Let's move everything down a little bit here. Okay. And I mean, the other element of making this stuff, that didn't work too well. Let me try that again. The other thing of making this, the other element of making this stuff personalized is changing the language. And this is a user whose name is iHeartR star is getting at this idea here. The point is that written language is very weird, and our brains are not super awesome at understanding it. We're much better at conversation. So when you do this in your head, I mean, you don't have time to do this on paper, obviously, but you should try to translate the argument into casual or conversational language. Because I mean, someone, your friend Ryan is clearly not going to use this kind of language to make his point. So let's do that. Let's put this into the kind of language that is more like, oh, I was talking to someone about this. So, okay. Ryan says, hey, man, you can get a lot of money for, if you have, that first sentence, a product that is a clear technological advance. If you have, some innovative product, it can be, dollar signs in my eyes. But you know what? it turns out that the best pricing strategy is not to charge the maximum that people would pay. I guess that's sort of weird. Hey, Ryan, what? And I mean, you know, so he said, well, lots of companies do that. You know, of course, lots of companies do charge the maximum because, you know, they're greedy or whatever. But when they do that, I mean, because they want to make, obviously, as much money as they can, and because they don't have a whole lot of time to do it. But if they do that, when they do that, other people get into the market faster. Like, other companies basically sit up and take notice. And meaning that those other companies will get into the same market faster. All right, this is what Ryan is saying. Like, well, you know what? The best thing you can do here is not to charge the maximum. Whoa, that's sort of weird, but all right. So what is Ryan's main point here? When you do this, forget which statements are in boldface for the moment. Let's number the statements. Actually, let's color the statements. Let's make that statement, I don't know, orange. Let's make this statement green. And then let's make this statement brown. And then let's make this statement red. And then the last few words of the brown thing are supposed to be red, so let me fix that too. So when they do that, other companies, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Yeah. All right, so what's Ryan's main point here in the chat box? Is it the green, the orange, the brown, or the red? On the market longer. Yeah, KT, you're kind of taking this and running out of the ballpark with it. You're not wrong there, but you're kind of taking the next step. The one thing here that is unlike normal people arguments is that all of the main points will be explicitly in there somewhere. I mean, that might not sound like much, but in real life, people don't always explicitly state their points. I mean, if someone says, "Ron, your fly is down," they're probably not going to go ahead and say, "So, by the way, you should zip that up, buddy." They're probably just going to say, "Ron, your fly is down," and expect me to understand why they would be telling me that. But here, in these arguments, the main point of the argument will always be explicitly in there somewhere. With the only exception to that being that there are some problems where they say, like, where could they be going with this? But those are not bold-based problems. So the green is the main point, right? So it doesn't look like the crowd here had too much trouble figuring that out. But the green is the main point. It's the tactic that Ryan is arguing for. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right, well, let's talk about what the other statements are, including the things that are not bold-faced, just to make sure that we are on the same page here. What is the orange? If you have some innovative product that can do big bucks, what is that? Not what, but why is Ryan doing that? It's background. It's like, yeah, let's make sure we know what we're talking about. The orange is not really a point. It's just, hey, let's make sure we're all on the same page here, which is a background statement. Okay, what's the brown? Remember, it's not what is it, it's why does Ryan talk about it, which is a different question entirely. So if you're giving me the what, you should reconsider that and think about the why. Why is the brown thing in there? Why does Ryan even bring that up? Chat box. Exception. It's a tendency, but it doesn't answer the question of why. Why is Ryan talking about it? I mean, again, these things are not objectively wrong, but they don't get at the real point here. General practice to make most profit, except for it doesn't, according to Ryan. So KT, you're getting warmer here, but you're still missing the essence of the brown thing. It goes, yeah, NJ is starting to get at us here. It doesn't really go against conventional wisdom. In fact, conventional wisdom would probably be the brown thing. But what it does go against is the point made by Ryan, right? So he mentions it because he is saying it is the wrong strategy. The brown is there because it is specifically something that Ryan is saying. It is something that Ryan says, according to Ryan, is the wrong strategy. I mean, that's why it is there. It's there because he thinks you should not do it. Does everybody understand that? It's not just because like some of you guys are sort of stating again facts that are not false as facts. Like it gives typical market strategy, but you have to say why Ryan is doing that, and it's like your fly is down. Your fly is down is the physical position of my zipper, blah blah blah, but that's not really the point. So this is what you have to watch out for, and this is why making this a conversation is such a helpful thing, because in conversation you know that he is not just saying la 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 la, here's what the market does. I mean, he's like, by the way, kids, don't do this, even though common sense seems like you should. So, this is not false, what Jordan has written here, but it still doesn't capture the essence of why Ryan is mentioning. Hold on a second. Can you guys hear me now? Chat box, let me know if you can hear me. All right. I have no idea what happened there. Yay for first world internet service. Okay, so the last thing that I said, let me just recap the main point about the brown thing, which is that, I mean, again, there are things like what Jordan said here. I mean, okay, again, this is not false. I mean, is this the main market strategy? Absolutely, yes, it is. Is this why Ryan is bringing it up? No, it is not. I mean, Ryan is specifically saying, kids, don't do this. This is not what you should do. This is the wrong strategy. So be aware of that. Okay, and then what is the red part? What's the red? Yeah, right? The red is the reason why you should not do the brown thing. I mean, be careful with being super vague here. I mean, again, this is why this is a conversation. Again, really people make it a conversation. I mean, if you just say things like consequence or justifying, that's not conversation. I mean, if you're like, why did I just tell you that? Well, it's a consequence. If someone said that, you'd be like, dude, you're not following me. You're not in this conversation here. The red thing is why the brown thing is the wrong strategy. Like Ryan is saying, don't do this, kids, and then here's why not. And again, it is sort of amazing how much easier it is to understand this stuff if you are making this a dialogue in your head. It is weird just how much easier it is. So make a Ryan, make some sort of interlocutor, and then also make sure that this becomes a dialogue in your head. The red stuff, red, is why you shouldn't do the brown thing. Okay, so let's take these and see where we get with them. So the ones that we are actually interested in the problem are the green and the red, because those are the things that are boldface. So the green thing is the main point. It's the tactic that Ryan is arguing in favor of. So, and then the red thing is why you shouldn't do the brown thing. Where the brown thing is something that's not the green thing. Okay. All right, let's do one more page here. Okay, now we have answer choices. Now that we have a clear idea in our heads of what these things are, because we're talking to someone whose name is Ryan, now let's look at the choices. I mean, then, because we're not really equipped to look at the choices until we have a Ryan and a dialogue and something like that. So the green is the main point. It's the tactic that Ryan is arguing for. So, I mean, one answer choice that's definitely wrong because of the green is the last one, and I don't think anybody picked the last choice. I mean, Ryan does not say that green is ineffective. I mean, he says that it's the best strategy to follow, so this is clearly wrong. You should be suspicious of these two choices because, again, these two choices where it says it's a strategy for achieving a certain goal, like, that's not false, but again, that's not the role. I mean, that's like, this is sort of like saying, again, I'm telling you where your zipper is located on your clothing. Like, it's not wrong, but it's also not why I'm telling you that. So be sort of suspicious of that. I mean, the best answer here is it's actually what Ryan is saying that you should do, which is it's the position advocated in the argument. And of course, when you translate these choices, remember that the argument is Ryan. So the challenge with the answer choices is you have to take your real world normal person understanding, conversational understanding, and translate it back into weird terminology that is divorced from conversation. Okay, well, what's the other one? Well, the other one is why you shouldn't do something else. Why you shouldn't do the brown thing. So if we look at these choices that are still here, let's look at them in reverse order. This is the opposite of the truth, right? Like, the second is actually specifically the reason why you should not prefer a different goal. KT, could you say CD in easy sentence? Not sure what you're asking there. Maybe you could rephrase that for me. But yeah, preferring a different goal, that is the exact opposite of what's going on. Actually, it's the reason to reject, not prefer. Also, the other word that's not okay here is goal. It's not a different goal. Like, everybody has the same goal. I mean, it's rejecting a different way of achieving the same goal. So that's another thing that's wrong there. So, not that. This one, the problem with C here is, again, it's not that strategy. I mean, or make sure you notice the words like that and this and stuff like that. I mean, that would mean the one we were just talking about. It's not a drawback to the green thing. Because remember, if you say that strategy, you're talking about the strategy that was mentioned earlier, and that makes this choice. This choice is already suspicious because, again, this doesn't really get at the point here. But it's definitely wrong because of that. Okay, so we need to differentiate between this and this. But again, if you understand the Ryan thing, then you know which one this is. The question is it the other strategy that Ryan is saying is wrong, or is it the reason why it's wrong? Well, we discussed, you know, the alternative position is not that statement. The alternative position is the one before it. Like, the actual alternative position would be, I think we're using green already, so let's make that hot pink. Okay. The alternative position would actually be this right here. It would be, that's the alternative position. Because that's the thing that Ryan is not. Ryan's saying you shouldn't do that. But the grounds for why not, in other words, the reason why Ryan says don't do this, this is the reason why not. So the answer we want is the first choice here. Ryan's saying, hey kids, don't do this, here's why not. Alternative position that the argument rejects is weirdo language for here is what Ryan is saying not to do. That's the purple part. Here's why Ryan is saying don't do that. That's the brown part. So this is the choice that we want. Regarding the whole conclusion thing, I mean, maybe you just got here or something, but remember this whole last screen that we had. This is the entire thing. The green is you don't just want to do that. You don't want to be like, oh, what is the conclusion? You want to aim for a deeper understanding of that. And I mean, in conversation, you will totally have a deeper understanding. It's more than just here is a conclusion. It's specifically here is a strategy that we should use versus a strategy that we should not use. So if you're just saying, oh, this is the conclusion, that's not really specific enough. I mean, you want to, if you can get more specific than that, it's better. This is not just a random conclusion. It's specifically a strategy that I am advocating for. So there you go. Any questions on this type of thing? Remember, with what level question, that's not a question that will ever help you to think about. If you are, the only people who should ever be thinking about that are people who write tests. If you are a test taker, your whole world is the question that is in front of you and the clock. That's it. Those are the only two things you should ever be thinking about. Won't translating the conversation take away time? I mean, it doesn't matter because if you don't do that, you pretty much can't solve these problems. So yes, it'll take some amount of time to do it, but it's essential. I mean, you can't really process these the way that you could if you don't do that. Again, make sure you don't, more importantly, make sure you don't think in this sort of way in general. I mean, this is a good example of the mentality that will just destroy you on this exam. You know, like if you have thoughts like this, even allowing yourself to have this kind of thought, allowing yourself to think things like this will destroy you on the GMAT. Like, if you think of something, the most important thing here is if you think of a strategy, just do it. Do not second guess it. Do not wonder how much time it will take. Do not do that. Like, the reason why the test has the format that it has is specifically to favor people who just do stuff and to work against people who sit there and sort of deliberate endlessly. So, you don't want to do that. I mean, part of what they're testing for here is your ability to just quickly settle on strategy and to start nailing it. I mean, you don't want to spend a million years wondering how long stuff will take. So, I mean, I'll just check. If you tell me what that strategy is, then I could certainly address it, but you're not telling me what that is. Again, the primary understanding that you're going for is this. It's like, here I'm talking to a dude named Ryan about this kind of thing. And so primarily I'm trying to just achieve a conversational understanding of this. So when it comes to these sorts of backups, I mean, those are backups is what those are. So, I mean, let me put that on the board and we'll talk about that. So here's what the deal here is. So these are not a primary strategy because they're not a complete understanding. I mean, these are, you should think of these as backups. In case you don't achieve a full, like, conversation style understanding of the argument. Because, I mean, okay, like what this is like saying is, I mean, just think about how not precise that is. I mean, it is some degree of understanding, but it's clearly not a full understanding. I mean, if you were in a conversation, this is sort of like saying, I mean, essentially this means, this is basically like, okay, I don't really understand what Ryan is saying, or those specifics are over my head. But at least I know that he's giving one of his reasons. Or at least I know he's arguing against that. Because, I mean, you can do that. I mean, let's say you walk in on some super technical argument about, I don't know, like spectroscopic analysis, and you don't really know what people are even arguing about. Like, even if you have no comprehension of what people are arguing about, you can still figure out, you know, who's on which side, and you can still figure out which statements belong to whom. You know, like even if Ryan is arguing about some complete technical nonsense, I can still at least figure out whether he is on board with any particular statement or not. So that's a backup. I mean, it's not a complete understanding, but if you don't get a complete understanding, then it's one of those, well, at least you could figure out whose side this is on kind of thing. So all of those things are backups in that sort of way. So, and then there's this. We'll move on to another problem here in a second, but does anybody have any thoughts on that in particular? That thingamajigger. Max 2 minutes. There you go. You should listen to our friend Vidita here. I mean, there's not a max time of 2 minutes for everything in the world because, you know, some problems are longer than some other problems. I mean, if a problem is something that is more involved, because you'll make up the time on other problems that are shorter. So, I mean, this is sort of the common sense angle here, but a lot of people sort of neglect that when they think about this. But, yeah, I mean, when problems are longer, you will, not just can, you definitely will spend more time on them on average. That's what an average is. I mean, 2 minutes might be an average, but that's an average. An average is an average, meaning it is not a maximum. So if you think you have to finish everything in 2 minutes, well, it's a very bad way of thinking about it. So, and I mean, yeah, and Sean Kamala, right, there's my, hey, the painting houses analogy that I used last time, sweet. Yeah, like while you are reading, this should be happening anyway. Because that's the other comment. That's actually a very good and insightful thing. Let me move this other stuff up. Right? Because, I mean, this is actually what should be happening as you are reading these things anyway. Is that. I mean, you should be doing this. I mean, maybe you don't name all of your speakers all the time. But if that's not happening while you read the passage anyway, then it means you're not really understanding the passage. So, yeah, this is a very good point. So, and this, I mean, you should be translating the words as you read them anyway. Because if you don't, it means you don't really understand it. If you aren't doing this, then you don't really understand what you're reading. You know, it doesn't have to be someone else's words or whatever, but it has to be your words. I mean, if you just read the words that are on the page, it's going to be not really possible for you to fully understand what's going on. I mean, that's the difficulty of anything written down, is that it's in weird written words. I mean, it's not going to be super easy or anything. But if you're reading and you're actually understanding what the story here is, then, yeah. Okay, let's do another one. Try that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away the answer choices for the first 2 minutes, and then I'm going to put them back. So try that And again, really make this a conversation and come up with your own phrasing of why these things are here. And then I will put the answer choices back at the end of the process. So give that a shot. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the choices. There's the choices. Don't forget where the answer choices are found. They are here. Okay, take a little more time if you need it here. 15, 20 more seconds. All right, again, if you're one of the few people here who doesn't have an answer choice yet, just go ahead and pick one. And then we'll talk about this. So you guys did a lot better on this one, which presumably means that this works when you think of it as like a human conversation. So hey man, how about that? So let's talk about what the story is here. So so let's give the speaker a name here. How about a female name this time? Anybody? A name? How about, yeah, all right, let's go with Jessica. All right, Jessica says. And I mean, again, let's put this into normal people words, because I mean, you know, nobody's going to say out loud, pesticides can adversely affect the environment in localities distant from where I mean, people don't talk like that, right? It's not a thing. It's not conversational. So Jessica says, all right, let's color each statement differently. So she says, yeah, okay, I know that these chemicals can screw up the environment far away from where they're actually used. But still, the regulations or the laws or whatever about this kind of stuff, but still the regulations or laws should be something that we keep local. And, you know, then she goes on to say, those places, even though they have effect in places that are far away, the worst of the worst in terms of the chemicals' effects is, you know, right there in the same location. Like, in other words, that effect far away may exist, but they're simply not as bad. And then she also says, you know, blah, blah, blah. It also depends on specific things like water supply and weather and stuff like that. There's also a whole host of other locally specific things that affect the issue too, like weather and like land topography, etc., soil, etc. And I mean, and the point is the feds aren't going to know this stuff. The feds or the national government clearly won't know as much as the local government about these things. All right, that's what she's saying. She's saying, all right, so what is this? So let's talk about what all of these are, and then we'll talk about the ones that are in boldface. So first of all, what is her point? I mean, the first thing you should always figure out here is what point is the person in front of me trying to make? And that's the single thing that making this a conversation will make it shockingly easier to do. It's like, what is the point? So where is she actually going with this? Like, which one of these is her point? It's the green one. Okay. Also, don't forget that in these sorts of arguments, if you're saying the brown one actually can't be her point because it's a fact. So also keep that in mind. The main point of an argument cannot be a fact. Does anybody know? So if you get confused or lost or whatever, keep in mind the main point of an argument should not be a fact. I mean, can anybody tell me why not? It should be a claim. Why should it not? Yeah, opinion or a claim or whatever, but like why? Why should it not be factual? That is so, Sean Kamala, that is what you do with facts, but that doesn't really directly address the question here, which is why should the main point itself not be a fact? Yeah, it's what Ryan said, right? If it's already a fact, you don't need an argument. That is exactly the point. So facts are facts. Like, they don't need arguments to support that. Like, if I say Ron is 5'10", well, that's a fact. I don't need to justify that with reasoning. You know, I don't need to be like blah 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 blah. Therefore, Ron is 5'10". No, that's not really how these things work. I mean, so you know, the brown thing is not the point because you would not need an argument. I mean, you could just say this. By the way, kids, the worst effects of these chemicals are right there where they release them. Fact. Period. So you don't need reasons for the brown thing because the brown thing is fact. So yeah, but it's the green thing, and if you were talking to Jessica about this, you would presumably understand that the green thing is her point, right? This is what Jessica thinks. This is what Jessica advocates. Okay, now let's talk about what the other statements are doing. What is the purple thing? Yeah, okay, I know these chemicals can screw up the environment in places that are hundreds of miles away. A concession is a good word, although I'm not really smart enough for big words like that. Let's try to make it a less big word than that. Yeah, it's a possible objection. It's like, here's what the other side might think. So, because her argument is we should keep it local. That's a reason why you might not think we should keep it local. So, like, this is a possible reason against what Jessica is advocating. And you know, she mentions it so that she can sort of dismiss it, or at least so that, you know, she's like, yes, I get that this is, you know, like she acknowledges it, but she ultimately argues that her reasons are more important or convincing. So, and I mean, people do this all the time, right? Like, hey, yeah, I get why you want to go to this restaurant, but we should actually go to this other restaurant, and here's why. I mean, this is no more complicated, really, than that. This is kind of like, I get why you want to go to the Crab Shack. I get it. But you know what? We should go to the steakhouse. And here's why. So, like, you know, okay, fine, I get it. You have a reason for wanting to go to the Crab Shack. But, hey, your reason is not as good as mine. That's kind of the point. And then these other things are all what in fact, the brown and the blue part. What are all of those? What are those doing? These are her reasons for thinking what she thinks. Like, these are Jessica's reasons for her point. This is why she thinks we should keep these things local. All right. So let's talk about that in terms of answer choices. So here is, I think I might be able to, now let's go to the next page with that. And then we'll compare against the choices. The point being that you should have something in your head before you start going through the choices. So here's a new page. There's the question with answer choices. And here is our analysis from the previous page. Okay, so what we're actually interested in at this point is this one and then this one. So as far as the red box is concerned, the first one is not a support for the conclusion because it is the opposite point. So definitely not that. The first states Jessica's conclusion, well, hardly. I mean, it's actually a concession to the other side. Grounds for a potential objection, that is absolutely what that is. Here's why the other people might think what they do think. And then support for the conclusion, well, no, because it doesn't. So, okay. And then her reason, I mean, the only difference here between C and D is that C says it is her conclusion and D says it's just one of her reasons. And I mean, see, because the thing is, if you're just climbing through these choices without a pre-existing understanding, then that difference looks like, oh my gosh, it's such a small thing. But it's totally not a small thing. I mean, this is a ginormously huge difference. I mean, one of them is, here is the point, and the other one is, oh, well, this is like our reason for it. They're very different things. So the one that's actually correct is the one that just says it's one of her reasons for thinking what she thinks, which is this one. So how about that? If you have any questions, please go ahead and throw them at me. Let's see, some people are typing, so. Do you recommend we write the translations? I mean, not really, because that's where it would take like a lot of time to do it. Although the best answer I can give you to that is that you should experiment and find out. I mean, I'm a little bit leery of that, but at the same time, as I mentioned before, the best strategy is just to do things and then see if they work. So that's the best response I can give you. That is the measured response of try it and see how it works out for you. If you're a very slow hand writer, then of course that's probably a bad idea. But I mean, more to the point, okay, like let me give you pro and a con here. I mean, the pro is like if you are sort of out of it, because again, you're doing this after 3 hours of taking the GMAT exam. So if you are not as mentally present anymore, then this will help you keep your focus. And of course, the con is that it will. There's two cons really. The first one obviously is that it will take, it's a substantial time investment. Unless you know like Greg shorthand, or you're like just an incredibly fast writer. Also, the other thing that it's not really a con, but it's more of a mentality thing than like here's a test taking strategy thing. I mean, this should be what you do inside your own mind whenever you read anything anyway. So, like, if you are reading a newspaper article about something, the words don't, like, stay on the page in the language that's on the page. I mean, it's not how people operate, right? You read it and your mind just takes it and conceptualizes it. So, in other words, I guess what I'm saying is, like, so if you feel the need to do something like this, the real problem might be that you're approaching the reading with the wrong mentality in the first place. Right? If you think about these as though they were academic passages, then you're basically going to have a very, very hard time with them, because they're not. It's like reading editorial in a newspaper. So try shifting your mentality as a whole thing toward the way that you would think about reading an editorial. So, okay. Let's see here. I don't know what, I guess if this refers to choice D, I don't know why you would want to use shorthand for choice D and not for another choice, but, okay, maybe you could, okay, please type the word the out. It takes like an extra quarter of a second. Okay, thanks for the clarification. But yeah, so, right, everything that you see, the things in because remember that CR and RC don't involve any actual, like, knowledge or learned skills here. These are entirely testing the kind of reasoning that exists in your head already. So remember, whenever you see anything, you should always think of everything in the CR and RC guides as examples or illustrations, is what they are. None of them are like, it's definitely not, oh, you should shorthand this in exactly this kind of way, because that would be sort of ridiculous. It's a different thing for every individual. And frankly, you should not be taking notes on most critical reasoning problems. On most of these, you should just read the argument and get it. But if you get confused, that's when you should take notes. But note-taking is a very, very individual thing. We list things in the book as, like, here are some starting points. Here's a starting point. Or something you can try. So then try it, and then, you know, keep what works for you and throw out what doesn't. Because it's not, I mean, these are not, in other words, you shouldn't be doing exactly what the book says in terms of taking notes. It's just like this is a starting point. So, yeah. Okay. Okay. Anything else about this last question? What is the, I mean, Abhishek, that doesn't so much make, I mean, that doesn't look like obsession as much as it looks like you weren't here for this slide. But the conclusion is that. But again, you can do better, as I mentioned before. You can do better than just saying, oh, this is the conclusion, period. That's still a very vague statement. I mean, it's not, because remember there are lots of kinds of conclusions in the world. I mean, there are conclusions in the form of judgments, like, this person is guilty, but that's a conclusion. It's a conclusion that makes a judgment. Or there are conclusions in terms of, like, recommended courses of action. Here's what we should do. Or there are, etc. Let me go ahead and put this on a slide, and then we got to wrap up here pretty soon. We'll do more of these in the next edition. Remember that what is the conclusion should be, I mean, ideally you should aim for something more specific than just the conclusion, because there are so many different types of conclusions out there in the world. I mean, the same thing with main point. I mean, there are lots of, there's like 100 bazillion million types of main points. You know, like this is a, you know, the course of action that Tom recommends. That's one type of conclusion. Or a judgment that Sarah advances. You could use a judgment. Or if it's something like we have a thing that we're trying to explain, you know, Eric's explanation for an observed phenomenon. I mean, these are just three of many, many, many examples. But the point is that there are lots of different kinds of conclusions in the world. So, and in a conversation, you'll know what the difference is. These are not the same thing as each other, right? If I'm trying to explain something factual, that's very different from trying to judge a situation. And both of those are very different from trying to recommend a strategy, and so on and so forth. So if you can be specific in this sort of way, of course, that's superior. That's the better strategy. Just asking what is the conclusion should not be plan A. That should be, you know, here's plan B, here's a reserve strategy. So, hold on a second. Okay, we do have to wrap up here pretty soon. If anybody has admin type questions, feel free, fire away. We're going to do some more of these in the next edition because we got a couple more of them lined up. And remember, quality, not quantity. I mean, yes, we did a grand total of 2 problems in this session, but that's the point. The point is that there's a there. I mean, if you spend an hour and 20 minutes talking about 2 problems and it's quality, it's much better than, you know, bang, 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 going through a bunch of problems and just doing stuff and not really penetrating to the essence of it. Same thing should be true when you study. I mean, if you get through fewer problems, but you get through them in more depth, then you come out with a genuine strategic understanding. That's what counts. It's quality, it's not quantity. These are from gmatprep. So where can you find the other recordings? This whole this is definitely not out of place. This is where you would ask a thing like this. There's only one page on the interwebs for Thursdays with Ron. Everything's on the same page. So someone has been kind enough to put a link in the box there. Or what might be even easier than that is you can just, type Thursdays with Ron into a search engine, Google, Bing, whatever, and go to the first hit, first search result. So it's a big page. If you scroll down, I know it's not obvious looking. Like when you look at the page, it doesn't seem like there's 100 million links underneath it, but there are. So just scroll down and you'll find all of that. So, okay. We will do more of this in the following session. Have a great couple of weeks and good night. And good luck.